The alarm bells rang through the space station like angry wasps. Dr. Elena Vasquez jumped from her coffee and ran to the main control room. The Deep Space Monitoring Station Cerberus had been quiet for months. Now every screen was flashing red. "What do we have?" Elena asked, sliding into her chair at the communication desk. Lieutenant Hayes pointed at the main screen. "Unknown signal coming from the Kepler 442 system. It's not natural." "Someone is broadcasting." Elena felt her heart race. In 3 years of monitoring deep space, they had never found proof of alien life. Now something was calling from 40 light-years away. "Play it," she said. The speakers filled with static, then strange sounds. It was not random noise. There was a pattern. Elena listened carefully as the signal repeated over and over. "It's math," she whispered. "Prime numbers. Someone is trying to talk to us." For the next 6 hours, Elena worked to decode the message. The aliens were smart. They started with simple math that any intelligent species would understand. Then they moved to basic pictures made of ones and zeros. The first images were simple. A star, a planet, stick figures that might be people. But as Elena decoded more, the pictures became darker. She saw peaceful beings working in what looked like gardens. Then she saw different shapes, angular, aggressive forms. The peaceful beings were running, hiding. The aggressive ones were destroying everything. "My God," Elena breathed as she understood. "They're asking for help." The final images were the worst. Empty planets, dead cities, and then one last picture that made Elena's blood run cold. It showed the aggressive aliens moving toward other star systems. They were spreading across the galaxy like a disease. Elena called Admiral Chen on Earth immediately. The Admiral was a hard man who had spent his life preparing for wars that never came. When Elena showed him the decoded message, his face went pale. "How long ago was this sent?" he asked. "The signal has been traveling for 40 years, Elena said. "This happened when my grandfather was young." Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment. "So they're probably all dead." "Maybe, but Admiral, look at this last part." Elena showed him the final message. The aliens had sent coordinates, not to their home system, but to dozens of other star systems, places where the aggressive aliens were heading next. "They're not just asking for help," Elena said. "They're warning us. They're telling us that these killers are still out there." Admiral Chen studied the star charts. Some of the marked systems were not far from Earth. "How long until this enemy reaches human space?" Elena did the math. "If they move as fast as we think they do, maybe 50 years, maybe less." The Admiral was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "Doctor, I need you to decode every bit of this message. Everything these people tried to tell us. I'm calling an emergency meeting of the World Council." 2 days later, Elena stood before the most powerful people on Earth. Presidents, generals, and scientists filled the Great Hall in Geneva. She showed them the alien message piece by piece. The room was dead silent as Elena explained what the pictures meant. The peaceful aliens called themselves the Kythera. They were gardeners and philosophers who had never known war. The aggressive species called themselves the hegemony. They believed only the strong deserved to live. "The hegemony has destroyed at least 12 civilizations," Elena said. "They're moving through the galaxy systematically. They find peaceful species and wipe them out completely." President Martinez of the Americas Union raised her hand. "How do we know this is real? How do we know it's not some kind of trick?" Elena had expected this question. "Because they didn't ask us to come save them. Look at the final message." She showed the last decoded image. It was simple but heartbreaking. Stick figures holding hands around a circle. Below it were symbols that Elena had translated as, "Remember we existed. Remember we tried to be good." "They're not asking for rescue," Elena said quietly. "They're asking someone to remember them. To know that they lived and loved and tried to make beautiful things before they died." The room was silent. Finally, Admiral Chen stood up. "The Kythera are probably extinct," he said. "But the hegemony is still out there. Still killing, still spreading. And eventually they'll find Earth." Secretary General Okafor leaned forward. "What are you suggesting, Admiral?" "I'm suggesting we have 2 choices," Chen said. "We can wait 50 years for genocidal aliens to show up at our door. Or we can do something about it now." "You want to start a war with aliens?" President Volkov asked. "No," Admiral Chen said firmly. "I want to stop a war before it reaches us. The hegemony has been committing genocide for centuries. Someone needs to make them stop." Dr. Elena had spent her whole life studying language and communication. She believed in talking, not fighting. But as she looked at those final images from the Kythera, she felt something change inside her. The Kythera were good people, she said. They made art and grew gardens and never hurt anyone. The hegemony killed them because they were different, because they were peaceful. She paused, looking around the room at the most powerful humans alive. What happens when the hegemony finds Earth? What happens when they see that we sometimes choose peace over war? What happens when they decide we're weak? The question hung in the air like smoke. Everyone in the room knew the answer. Admiral Chen walked to the center of the room. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in human history, we know for certain that we're not alone in the universe. We also know that the galaxy is home to creatures that consider mercy a crime and kindness a disease. He gestured to the images on the screen. The Kythera reached out in their final moments. Not for revenge, not for rescue. They reached out to warn us, to tell us that evil was coming. The Admiral's voice grew stronger. I say we honor their warning. I say we make sure the hegemony never gets the chance to judge humanity. I say we go out there and stop them. President Martinez spoke first. The cost would be enormous. We'd have to build ships, weapons, train soldiers for space combat. The cost of doing nothing is extinction, Admiral Chen replied. One by one, the world leaders voted. It was not unanimous, but it was enough. Humanity would build a fleet. Humanity would go to war among the stars. As the meeting ended, Elena found herself standing alone with Admiral Chen, looking at the alien message still glowing on the screen. Do you think we're doing the right thing? She asked. The Admiral was quiet for a moment. Doctor, I've been a soldier for 30 years. I've seen what humans do to each other when we forget how to be civilized. But this, he gestured to the Kythera's final message, this is different. This is evil that destroys good for the crime of being good. He turned to face her. The Kythera were gardeners who never learned to fight. Maybe that's why they died. Maybe that's why the universe needed someone else to hear their message. Someone who knows how to grow flowers and also how to kill monsters. Elena looked at the peaceful stick figures in the alien message one last time. We'll remember you, she whispered. And we'll make sure you're the last ones to die alone. Outside the building, the first orders were already going out. Shipyards would be expanded. Weapons would be designed. Soldiers would be trained. Humanity was going to war. Captain Sarah Torres had seen death before, but nothing like this. Her scout ship Falcon drifted through what used to be the Kythera home system. Where there should have been cities and farms, there was only ash and metal wreckage. Jesus Christ, whispered Pilot Jackson from the navigation station. The whole planet looks burned. Sarah stared at the main screen. The planet below them was brown and gray where it should have been blue and green. The orbital stations were twisted metal, broken like toys. Even from space they could see the massive craters where cities used to be. Take us down to the second planet, Sarah ordered. Sensors show some kind of structures still standing there. As they descended through the atmosphere, the devastation became clearer. The Kythera had built beautiful things. Sarah could see the remains of crystal towers and flowing architecture that looked like art. All of it was broken now. Captain, said Communications Officer Park, I'm getting faint signals from the asteroid belt. It might be survivors. Sarah felt her heart jump. They had come here expecting to find graves. Maybe someone was still alive. Set course for the asteroids, she ordered. And Park, try to establish communication. Use the same mathematical patterns Dr. Vasquez taught us. It took 6 hours to find them. Hidden deep inside a hollowed-out asteroid, the survivors had built a small shelter. When Sarah's team boarded their makeshift home, she almost cried. There were only 43 Kythera left. They were thin and scared, with large eyes that reminded Sarah of deer. Their leader was an old female named Zelka, who spoke through a crude translation device they had built. You came, Zelka said, her voice barely a whisper through the translator. We sent the message so long ago. We thought no one would ever hear it. Sarah knelt down to be at eye level with the alien woman. We heard you. We came as fast as we could. What happened here? Jelka's large eyes filled with tears. The hegemony came 2 seasons ago. They said we were weak. They said weakness was a disease that had to be burned out of the galaxy. Through broken words and simple drawings, Jelka told the story. The hegemony was made up of 3 different alien species who had joined together for one purpose: conquest. The Vorth were big and brutal like living tanks. The Zephyrians were cold and calculating, perfect strategists. The Mektar were small but vicious, taking pleasure in causing pain. They did not want our planets for themselves, Jelka explained. They destroyed everything because they enjoyed destroying. They said civilizations like ours made the galaxy weak. Sarah felt sick. How many of your people lived on these worlds? 3 billion, Jelka whispered. 3 billion Cathara who never hurt anyone, who grew gardens and made music and tried to understand the stars. The old alien woman led Sarah deeper into their shelter. On the walls they had painted pictures, memories of their lost world. Sarah saw images of vast gardens, crystal cities, and Cathara families living in peace. We were philosophers and gardeners, Jelka said. We spent our time learning about the universe and growing beautiful things. We never imagined that someone could hate us for that. Show me what you know about the hegemony, Sarah said. Jelka led her to another room where the survivors had gathered every piece of information they could find. Star charts showing hegemony movements, technical data about their ships. Most horrible of all, recordings of their communications. Sarah listened to hegemony officers discussing their work like farmers talking about crops. They spoke of cleansing star systems and purifying the galaxy. They had lists of dozens of other peaceful species they planned to destroy. Captain, Officer Park called from across the room. You need to see this. Park had found a hegemony database the Kithara had managed to steal before their world was destroyed. It contained records of their past conquests, hundreds of civilizations all wiped out completely. They've been doing this for over 1,000 years, Park said, his voice shaking. Look at this. The gentle singers of Vega, extinct 300 years ago. The harmony builders of Wolf 359 destroyed just 50 years ago. Captain, they're not just conquering. They're committing systematic genocide across the entire galaxy. Sarah felt cold anger building in her chest. These were not warriors fighting other warriors. These were monsters who hunted peaceful people for sport. Jelka, Sarah said, do you know where the hegemony is now? The old Cathara nodded sadly. They move in a pattern. They destroy one system, then move to the next. They are methodical, efficient. She showed Sarah a star chart with red marks. These are the systems they have marked for destruction. These peaceful peoples will die just as we did. Sarah studied the chart. Some of the marked systems were uncomfortably close to Earth. What about their military strength? Sarah asked. Another survivor, a younger male named Thexi, brought out more stolen data. The hegemony has vast fleets. Their ships are built only for destruction. They have weapons that can burn planets from orbit. He showed Sarah technical diagrams. The hegemony ships were ugly, angular things covered in weapons. They looked like flying weapons platforms rather than spaceships. But Captain, Thexi said quietly, there is something important. The hegemony has never fought anyone who fought back. They only attack peaceful species. They have never faced real resistance. Sarah felt something click in her mind. You mean they've never fought a real war? Exactly. They are bullies, not warriors. They know how to destroy helpless people, but they have never faced an enemy that could hurt them back. As Sarah prepared to leave with this intelligence, Jelka grabbed her hand with surprising strength. Your people, the old alien said. I can see it in your eyes.
You have the fire we never possessed.
You are young, but your eyes burn with something we lost long ago. What do you mean? Sarah asked. We were always gardeners, Jelka said. We forgot that sometimes gardeners must protect their gardens from pests. We thought all intelligent life was good. We were wrong. The old woman looked directly into Sarah's eyes. Your species is different. You know how to be gentle, but you also know how to be fierce, perhaps? Perhaps the gardeners were not meant to stop the plague. Perhaps that task belongs to the warriors. As Sarah's ship lifted off from the asteroid, she carried with her complete intelligence about the hegemony's military capabilities, their locations, and their plans. But more than that, she carried the weight of knowing that 3 billion innocent people had died, while the universe did nothing. Captain, Park said as they jumped to hyperspace, what do we tell Earth? Sarah stared at the star chart showing the hegemony's next targets. Peaceful civilizations who had no idea what was coming for them. We tell them the truth, she said. We tell them that there are monsters in the dark, and they're coming for everyone who believes in peace. We tell them that the Kithara died alone, but they don't have to. She thought about Jelka's words. Perhaps the gardeners were not meant to stop the plague. Perhaps that task belongs to the warriors. And we tell them, Sarah added, that it's time for the warriors to wake up. Behind them, the ruined Cathera system grew smaller and smaller. Ahead of them lay Earth, where humanity would have to decide what kind of species they wanted to be. Would they be gardeners who let evil flourish? Or would they be warriors who protected the innocent? Sarah already knew what her choice would be. The question was whether the rest of humanity would agree. The images from the Cathera system played on every screen on Earth. Admiral Chen stood before the United Nations, his uniform crisp and his face hard as stone. Behind him, the ruins of an alien civilization told a story that made the entire world hold its breath. 3 billion people, Admiral Chen said quietly. 3 billion intelligent beings who spent their lives growing gardens and making art. All dead. All murdered because they chose peace over violence. The assembly hall was silent except for the quiet sobbing of some delegates. The images were too clear, too real to deny. Broken cities, burned planets, and the skeletal remains of orbital stations that had once housed millions. The hegemony did not destroy the Cathera for resources, Admiral Chen continued. They did not want their planets or their technology. They killed them because they considered peace to be a genetic defect that needed to be eliminated from the galaxy. Secretary General Okafor leaned forward. Admiral, what are you recommending? Admiral Chen's eyes swept across the assembly. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat before him. For once in human history, politics and borders seemed meaningless. The hegemony has marked 47 star systems for destruction, he said. 47 civilizations that will die exactly like the Cathara unless someone stops this genocide. He pressed a button, and the star chart appeared behind him. Red dots marked doomed civilizations across a section of the galaxy. Some were uncomfortably close to Earth. Moreover, Admiral Chen said, analysis of hegemony communications suggests that our own solar system is on their expansion list, not immediately but within the next 30 to 50 years. President Martinez raised her hand. Admiral, even if we wanted to help these other civilizations, do we have the capability to fight an interstellar war? Admiral Chen had been waiting for this question. Ma'am, 6 months ago I would have said no. But our engineers have been working around the clock since we received the Cathara message. I believe we can not only fight the hegemony, we can win. General Morrison from the European Alliance stood up. Explain. The hegemony has been fighting helpless gardeners for 1,000 years, Admiral Chen said. They have powerful weapons, but their tactics are crude. They've never faced an enemy that shoots back. Meanwhile, humanity has spent our entire history perfecting the art of war against other humans. He gestured to the screen, where technical diagrams appeared. We've developed new technologies specifically for space combat. Railguns that can punch through any armor. Nuclear torpedoes guided by artificial intelligence. Drone swarms that can overwhelm enemy defenses. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had first decoded the alien message, stood up from the observer section. Admiral, may I speak? Admiral Chen nodded. 6 months ago, I was a linguist who believed in peaceful contact with alien species, Elena said. But I've spent every day since then studying hegemony communications. I've read their military reports, their philosophy, their plans for the future. She paused, her voice shaking with emotion. These are not misguided conquerors. These are not warriors fighting for resources or territory. They are genocidal fanatics who believe that compassion is evil and mercy is weakness. They will never stop. They will never negotiate. They will kill every peaceful species in the galaxy unless someone kills them first. The hall erupted in discussion. Delegates argued in dozens of languages while Admiral Chen waited patiently for order. Finally, Secretary General Okafor called for silence. Admiral Chen, what exactly are you proposing? Total war, Admiral Chen said simply. Complete mobilization of human industry for one purpose, the destruction of the hegemony's ability to commit genocide. President Volkov leaned forward. The cost would be enormous. The cost of failure would be the extinction of every peaceful species in this part of the galaxy, Admiral Chen replied, including eventually humanity itself. The vote took 3 hours. When it was finished, the result was 187 to 6 in favor of military action. For the first time in human history, the entire species was united in a single cause. The next morning, every factory on Earth received new orders. Car companies were told to build spacecraft. Electronics manufacturers were ordered to produce targeting systems. Steel mills were converted to produce armor plating. The entire global economy shifted overnight from consumer goods to instruments of war. In the asteroid belt, mining operations expanded at breakneck speed. Automated factories began churning out warships by the hundreds. Each ship was designed with one purpose: to kill hegemony vessels as efficiently as possible. The most brilliant military minds on Earth worked together for the first time. American admirals shared strategies with Chinese generals. Russian engineers collaborated with Japanese designers. Israeli weapons experts trained alongside British tacticians. Captain Sarah Torres was promoted to Commodore and put in charge of the first attack squadron. Her experience with the Cathera survivors made her one of the few humans who truly understood what they were fighting. "Remember," she told her pilots during training, "the hegemony thinks we're weak because we sometimes choose peace. They think compassion makes us vulnerable. They're about to learn that there's a difference between choosing not to fight and not knowing how to fight." The Cathera survivors had been brought to Earth and given a place of honor at the fleet headquarters. Jelka, despite her age and trauma, insisted on helping train human forces about hegemony technology. "Your people ask if this war is necessary," she told Admiral Chen during one planning session. "But you do not understand. This is not a war. Wars happen between armies. This is pest control. The hegemony is a disease that must be burned out before it spreads further." As the months passed, Earth's fleet grew from dozens of ships to hundreds to thousands. Orbital shipyards worked constantly, turning out new vessels. Each ship carried weapons that could crack planets and shields that could survive direct hits from nuclear explosives. But it wasn't just about the ships. Human tactics were evolving too. Generals studied every piece of hegemony intelligence, looking for weaknesses. They found plenty. "The hegemony fights like bullies," General Morrison explained to his staff. "They rely on overwhelming force against helpless targets. But their formations are sloppy. Their communication protocols are predictable, and they've never learned to adapt to unexpected threats." "What kind of unexpected threats?" asked Colonel Hayes. General Morrison smiled grimly. "Humans who fight like humans. Deception, misdirection, concentrated strikes, and tactical sacrifice. Things the hegemony has never seen because they've only fought peaceful gardeners." Meanwhile, intelligence teams intercepted more hegemony communications. The enemy was still systematically destroying peaceful civilizations, moving methodically from system to system. They had no idea that Earth was preparing to challenge them. In one intercepted message, a hegemony commander discussed humanity briefly. "The third planet of the Sol system shows signs of industrial civilization. Low priority target. They appear to be peaceful traders and explorers. We will cleanse them after dealing with the immediate target list." Admiral Chen read that message to his senior staff. "Peaceful traders and explorers," he repeated. "They think we're harmless. Should we correct that assumption?" asked Commodore Torres. "No," Admiral Chen said. "Let them think we're harmless right up until we start killing them. As Earth's war machine reached full production, the final pieces fell into place. The Global Defense Initiative had become something the world had never seen before. A unified human military with a single mission. Dr. Elena had been appointed head of psychological warfare. Her job was to study hegemony communications and find ways to demoralize the enemy. What she found was interesting. "They're supremely confident," she reported to Admiral Chen. "They've won every engagement for over 1,000 years. They literally cannot imagine losing. That's a weakness we can exploit." "How?" "When we hit them everywhere at once. We show them that their entire philosophy is wrong. We prove that sometimes the gardeners grow teeth." Admiral Chen looked out at the fleet assembling in Earth orbit. Thousands of human warships, each one carrying weapons that could sterilize planets. Each one crewed by humans who had seen what the hegemony did to peaceful people. "Dr. Vasquez," he said, "when we launch this attack, I want you to broadcast a message to every hegemony ship we encounter." "What message?" Admiral Chen's eyes were as hard as iron. "Tell them this is for the Cathera. Tell them this is for every peaceful species they've murdered, and tell them that the gardeners are done hiding." In the depths of space, the hegemony continued their systematic genocide, unaware that their victims had found champions. They had calculated wrong about humanity. They had mistaken the choice for peace as inability for war. They were about to learn the difference. The attack began at 400 Earth Standard Time across 12 star systems simultaneously. Admiral Chen had called it Operation Righteous Fury, and it lived up to its name. Commodore Sarah Torres led Battle Group, Alpha against the hegemony staging area at Proxima Thule. Her fleet of 300 ships dropped out of hyperspace like a storm of metal and fire. The hegemony forces never saw them coming. All ships, this is Torres, she broadcast on all frequencies. Remember the Cathera? Remember every peaceful species these monsters have murdered. Today we teach the galaxy that evil has consequences. The hegemony station was massive, a dark metal structure the size of a moon, bristling with weapons and surrounded by hundreds of warships. It was a forward base where the enemy gathered their fleets before moving on to destroy the next peaceful civilization. Sarah's tactical officer, Lieutenant Park, looked nervous. "Commodore, they outnumber us 3-1. "They've never fought humans before," Sarah replied. "Numbers won't save them." The hegemony response was exactly what human intelligence had predicted, massive but clumsy. The alien ships formed up in rigid battle lines, like naval vessels from centuries past. Their communications were formal and predictable. Unknown vessels came a transmission in broken English. "You will surrender immediately, or be destroyed." The hegemony does not tolerate interference. Sarah smiled coldly. "Patch me through to their fleet commander." A few seconds later, a hideous face appeared on her screen. It was Vorth, one of the 3 hegemony species. The creature looked like a cross between a shark and a tank with dead black eyes and rows of sharp teeth. "I am War Leader Grok," the alien snarled. "You will submit to cleansing or die fighting. It makes no difference to us." "I'm Commodore Sarah Torres of the Human Defense Force," Sarah replied calmly. "We're here because you made one mistake, Grok." The alien commander laughed, showing those terrible teeth. "What mistake could weak creatures like you possibly punish?" "You killed gardeners," Sarah said, "and you assumed no one would care." She cut the transmission and gave her next order. "All ships execute attack pattern Omega. Show them what happens when gardeners grow teeth." What followed was not a battle, it was a demonstration. Human ships moved like wolves, striking in coordinated packs and vanishing before the enemy could respond. Their weapons hit with pinpoint accuracy, while hegemony return fire missed completely. The enemy had built their tactics around fighting peaceful species who couldn't fight back. They had never faced an opponent who used deception, flanking maneuvers, and sacrificial attacks. Captain James Wright of the destroyer Vengeance led his ship on a suicide run straight through the enemy formation. His vessel was destroyed, but not before launching a spread of nuclear torpedoes that tore through 6 hegemony battleships. "For the Cathera," Wright screamed over the radio as his ship exploded. His sacrifice created a gap in enemy lines that 3 human squadrons immediately exploited. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. Human ships fought with a desperate fury that the hegemony had never encountered. When cornered, they rammed enemy vessels. When outnumbered, they used their destruction as weapons. The hegemony's superior numbers meant nothing when their ships were too slow to track human movements and too predictable to avoid human traps. "War Leader," a Zephyrian tactical officer called to Grok over the comm. "Their attack patterns make no sense. They're sacrificing ships for no strategic gain." Grok watched another human destroyer ram itself into a hegemony cruiser, destroying both vessels. These creatures fight like madmen. What the hegemony couldn't understand was that every human in the fleet had seen the images from Cathera space. They had seen the ruins of a peaceful civilization. They had met the survivors who had lost everything to hegemony cruelty. They weren't just fighting for victory, they were fighting for justice. Meanwhile, in the other 11 systems under attack, the same story was repeating. Human fleets struck with overwhelming force and tactical brilliance. Admiral Chen had studied the enemy for months, learning their weaknesses and exploiting them perfectly. At Wolf 359, Admiral Park's forces hit a hegemony cleansing fleet in the middle of destroying another peaceful species. The aliens called themselves the Quiet Minds, and they were philosophers who had never developed weapons. Admiral Park's opening move was to ram his flagship directly into the hegemony command ship, destroying both vessels but throwing the enemy fleet into chaos. His sacrifice allowed the rest of his forces to rescue most of the Quiet Mind civilians. At Kepler 62, Commander Hassan's battle group found a hegemony research facility where the aliens were studying captured members of peaceful species. The experiments being conducted were so horrific that Hassan ordered the facility destroyed with nuclear weapons rather than captured. "Some things," Hassan reported to Earth, "are too evil to survive." But it was at Proxima Thule where the real message was sent. Commodore Torres had not just defeated the hegemony fleet, she had systematically destroyed every piece of their infrastructure. "Commodore," Lieutenant Park reported, "enemy fleet is completely destroyed. The station is defenseless." Sarah looked at the massive hegemony base floating before them. Inside were the records of 1,000 years of genocide, the plans for destroying dozens more peaceful species, the technology that had murdered billions. "Fire everything," she ordered. The human fleet unleashed its full firepower. Nuclear torpedoes, railgun slugs, and plasma beams tore the station apart piece by piece. Sarah wanted to make sure that nothing remained. No records, no weapons, no ability to coordinate future genocides. As the station broke apart in balls of nuclear fire, Sarah broadcast one final message to any surviving hegemony forces in the system. "This is Commodore Torres to all hegemony vessels. The Cathera are not forgotten. The peaceful species you've murdered are not forgotten. Today the gardeners show you what happens when someone threatens their garden." The message was broadcast in all hegemony languages, ensuring that news of the defeat would spread quickly through their empire. Across the 12 attack zones, the results were the same. Human forces had not just won, they had dominated completely. The hegemony, for the first time in their history, had been defeated. The enemy's reaction was exactly what human psychologists had predicted: panic. Intercepted communications showed hegemony commanders frantically reporting to their leadership. The Vorth blamed the Zephyrians for bad intelligence. The Zephyrians blamed the Mektar for tactical failures. The Mektar blamed everyone else for underestimating the enemy. War leader Sekth of the Mektar sent a frantic message to hegemony high command: "The humans fight like demons. They show no fear of death. They sacrifice their ships like weapons. How do we fight creatures that embrace destruction?" But the most important intercept came from hegemony Supreme Commander Vex High, an ancient Zephyrian who had led their genocidal campaigns for centuries. "All fleet commanders," the message read, "the humans are not what we believed. They are not peaceful traitors. They are apex predators pretending to be gardeners. All operations are suspended until we understand this threat." Admiral Chen read that message in his command center on Earth and allowed himself a small smile. "Dr. Vasquez, I believe we've gotten their attention." Dr. Elena nodded, studying the intelligence reports. "Admiral, they're truly afraid for the first time in their history. They don't understand how we fight because they've never faced real resistance." "Good," Admiral Chen said. "Fear is the beginning of wisdom. Maybe now they'll understand what it felt like to be a Cathera watching death ships appear in their peaceful skies." The first phase of Operation Righteous Fury was complete. 12 hegemony strongholds had been destroyed. Their forward momentum had been stopped. Their sense of invincibility had been shattered. But Admiral Chen knew this was only the beginning. The hegemony still controlled vast territories and had enormous fleets. They would adapt, reorganize, and strike back. The difference was that now they knew they were in a real war. Not a genocide against helpless victims, but a war against an enemy that could hit back. "All ships," Admiral Chen broadcast to the returning fleets, "excellent work. But this is only the first battle. The hegemony will learn from this defeat and come back stronger. We need to be ready for their counterattack." As the human fleets returned to base for repairs and resupply, they carried with them something more valuable than victory: proof that the hegemony could be beaten. Across the galaxy, intercepted communications showed that word was spreading among the surviving peaceful species. The gardeners had found their champions. The helpless had found their protectors. For the first time in 1,000 years, the hegemony was afraid. The war ended not with a single great battle, but with the slow collapse of a 1,000-year empire. 6 months after Operation Righteous Fury, the last hegemony stronghold surrendered as human fleets appeared in their home systems. Fleet Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of his flagship Humanity's Wrath as it entered the hegemony capital system. Below them lay the 3 homeworlds of the species that had terrorized the galaxy for so long. "Admiral," reported Captain Martinez from the sensor station, "we're receiving surrender transmissions from all 3 planets." Chen nodded grimly. "Acknowledge their surrender, but maintain full alert. These are the creatures that destroyed entire civilizations for sport. We take no chances." The hegemony's collapse had been swift once their military superiority was broken. The 3 species that made up their empire, the brutal Vorth, The calculating Zephyrians and the sadistic Mektar had immediately turned on each other when faced with defeat. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now Admiral Chen's chief diplomatic advisor, studied the incoming messages. "Admiral, they're blaming each other for the military failures. The Vorth say the Zephyrians gave them bad intelligence. The Zephyrians say the Mektar were too bloodthirsty to fight strategically. The Mektar say the Vorth were too stupid to adapt." "Typical," Chen replied. "Bullies always blame someone else when they finally meet real resistance." The past 6 months had seen humanity's fleet sweep across hegemony space like an unstoppable force. But it wasn't just military might that had brought victory. It was the galaxy itself rising up against its oppressors. As word of humanity's first victories spread, the surviving peaceful species had found courage they didn't know they possessed. The Quiet Minds, rescued from Wolf 359, had shared intelligence about hegemony movements. The Crystal Singers of Vega had provided safe harbors for human fleets. Even species humanity had never contacted sent messages of support. Commodore Sarah Torres, now commanding the Third Fleet, had led the liberation of 17 star systems. In each one she found the same thing: peaceful species who had been living in terror, waiting for the hegemony to come and destroy them. It wasn't just the Cathara, she reported to Admiral Chen. The hegemony had the entire galaxy paralyzed with fear. Peaceful species were hiding, afraid to build anything beautiful because they knew the genocidal maniacs would eventually come to destroy it. But the most important development came from an unexpected source. 3 months into the human campaign, a message arrived from deep space that changed everything. It came from a species called the Eternal Gardeners, ancient beings who had hidden themselves in the galactic core when the hegemony first rose to power. They had watched for 1,000 years as the galaxy's peaceful species were systematically murdered. "We greet the young warriors," their message read. "For 10 centuries we have hidden while evil spread across the stars. We believed that nothing could stop the plague of cruelty. We were wrong. You have proven that compassion and strength can coexist. You have shown the galaxy that gardens can grow teeth." The Eternal Gardeners emerged from hiding and shared technology that made human ships even more powerful. More importantly, they shared the locations of other hidden civilizations. Dozens of species that had survived by fleeing to the galaxy's most remote regions. One by one, these hidden peoples emerged to join the fight against the hegemony. The war became not just humanity against the genocidal empire, but the entire galaxy's peaceful species united against their oppressors. Now, as Admiral Chen's fleet entered the hegemony capital system, he carried with him representatives from 47 different species. The galaxy's gardeners had finally come together to deal with the plague that had infected it for so long. "Admiral," Dr. Vasquez said, "we're receiving a formal surrender request from the Hegemony High Council. They want to negotiate terms." Chen considered this. For months he had dreamed of this moment. The creatures who had murdered billions, who had destroyed entire civilizations for the crime of being peaceful, were finally defeated. "Put them through," he said. The screen filled with the images of the 3 leaders of the hegemony: Warlord Grakth of the Vorth, Strategist Prime Vexhai of the Zephyrians, and Painmaster Seklor of the Mektar. All 3 looked terrified. "Human leader," Vexhai spoke first, his cold voice trembling. "We wish to discuss terms of surrender. Perhaps we can reach an arrangement that benefits both our peoples." Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment. Behind him stood Jelka, the elderly Cathara survivor who had helped humanity understand their enemy. Next to her were representatives of dozens of species that had suffered under hegemony rule. "You want to negotiate?" Chen said finally. "The same way you negotiated with the Cathara? The same way you negotiated with the Harmony Builders and the Crystal Singers and 45 other peaceful species?" Warlord Grakth snarled, showing his shark-like teeth. "We are warriors. We demand the right of honorable surrender." "Warriors?" Chen's voice was deadly quiet. "Warriors fight other warriors. You murdered gardeners and philosophers and artists. You're not warriors. You're genocidal monsters." The 3 hegemony leaders looked at each other nervously. They had expected to be able to negotiate some kind of deal, maybe even maintain power over their homeworlds. "What do you want from us?" Painmaster Seklor asked. Admiral Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Justice." Over the next 3 months, the galaxy watched as humanity did something unprecedented. Instead of simply destroying their defeated enemies, They established war crimes tribunals. The hegemony's leaders and military commanders were put on trial for genocide. The trials were broadcast across the galaxy, allowing every species to see justice being done. Witnesses testified about the horrors they had endured. Evidence was presented of the systematic murder of entire civilizations. Dr. Elena served as chief prosecutor, using her linguistic skills to present testimony from dozens of species in their own languages. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. For 1,000 years, she said in her closing argument, these defendants have treated peace as a crime and compassion as a disease. They have murdered billions of innocent beings whose only fault was choosing to build gardens instead of weapons. Today the galaxy says never again. The sentences were swift and final. The hegemony's leadership was found guilty of genocide and crimes against sentient life. They were executed not with weapons, but with a simple injection that put them to sleep forever. Far more mercy than they had ever shown their victims. But the real change came in what happened next. Representatives from every peaceful species in the galaxy gathered on Earth for the first Galactic Peace Convention. Admiral Chen, now promoted to Supreme Commander of Allied Forces, addressed the assembly. We have proven that evil can be defeated, he said. But defeating evil once is not enough. We must make sure it never rises again. The convention established the Galactic Peacekeeping Force, a combined fleet made up of ships and crew from every member species. Their mission was simple: protect the innocent, punish the guilty, and ensure that never again would peaceful species face extinction simply for choosing peace. The 3 former hegemony species were not destroyed. Instead, they were placed under galactic supervision, their children educated in new ways of thinking. The Vorth learned that strength could be used to protect rather than destroy. The Zephyrians discovered that intelligence could solve problems rather than create them. The Mektar found that their energy could be channeled into building rather than breaking. It would take generations. But slowly, the galaxy's former oppressors began to change. The Cathera survivors were given new worlds to cultivate, beautiful garden planets where they could rebuild their civilization. Jelka, despite her age, lived to see the first new Cathera city completed. Your people kept their promise, she told Admiral Chen during the dedication ceremony. You remembered us. You made sure we were not forgotten. Chen looked out at the crystal spires and flowing gardens that the Cathera had built on their new world. We did more than remember you, he said. We made sure that what happened to you will never happen to anyone else. As the years passed, the galaxy transformed. Trade routes opened between species that had hidden from each other for centuries. Art and culture flowed freely between worlds. The fear that had paralyzed peaceful civilizations for 1,000 years was replaced by hope. And always, patrolling the space lanes were the ships of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force. Human vessels flew alongside Cathera biodomes, Crystal Singer Harmony ships, and vessels from dozens of other species. Their hulls bore a simple inscription in every galactic language: Terra Defense Force, no one dies alone. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Gardens were beautiful and necessary, but gardens needed gardeners. And sometimes gardeners needed to be warriors. 5 years after the end of the Hegemony War, Admiral Chen received a message from the Outer Rim. A new distress signal, mathematical patterns indicating an intelligent species under attack. He looked at the message for a long moment, then activated the fleet-wide communication system. All ships. This is Admiral Chen. We have work to do. Across the galaxy, the peaceful species sleep safely in their beds, knowing that the gardeners who protect them are also the warriors who will defend them. Evil still exists among the stars, but it no longer spreads unchecked. The galaxy has gardeners, no,